What's up, game designers, and welcome back to The Forge. This week, we're going to continue our journey into the audible frontier by experimenting with sound effects. Now, good sound design and well-executed sound effects do a lot to bring a player into the atmosphere of a game world. Let's take a quick look at this example from The Last of Us Part 2. Now let's see if we can identify all the different sounds here. Probably the most prominent is the sound of the running stream. There are also the horse's hooves splashing as they walk through the water. Slightly less noticeable is the horse's breathing, and even more subtle is the sound of the character's rig rustling around. There are animal and insect sounds both near the camera and far. Now here are a few more demo scenes from that same game. See what sounds you can identify. This is a great exercise in training your ears to distinguish certain sounds from others. Now, being able to do this well will greatly improve your ability to design sounds for a particular environment in a game. Now that your ears are tuned in, let's go over how you might go about designing original sound for a game. Now, one thing we need to think about is sonic representation, or exactly how a sound represents and conveys the idea of its source. Now, already we have two distinct things we're dealing with: a source being the cause of the sound waves, and the sound waves themselves. Now, sometimes the sound a source actually makes doesn't always translate well when recorded. And in many cases, an actual recording of the thing you are trying to represent won't be the best approach, usually due to the unavailability of a source. You see this exemplified in films all the time with what is called Foley art. Now let's look at a classic medieval battle. There are a few challenges to this, right? We certainly lack the ability to travel through time to an actual medieval battle. Darn. So let's recreate one without anyone getting hurt and just use the sound from that. Yeah, doesn't sound too convincing, does it? It lacks a certain intensity and emotion, so let's bring it! Let's break down the different elements that will make for a compelling representation. Metallic impacts and scrapes, wood impacts on shields, crowds shouting, distinct injury screams, ugh! Perhaps some off-screen sounds just to add to the palette, like horses galloping or explosions. All these could be recreated and mixed together to sound like a massive battle. Now let's go ahead and apply a finished product to this scene and see how it turns out. Much more satisfying! Now you may come across a sound that is impossible to recreate because its source is too elusive or may not actually exist. For example, do you know what a UFO really sounds like? I wish I did. Or how about Thor's hammer as it flies through the air? Now this is where you really have to put your creativity up to bat. Being able to identify specific sounds like our previous exercise and how they make you feel or see certain things in your imagination will help you knock an original sound effect out of the park. Now, speaking of, did you know that the sound of the T-Rex roar in the original Jurassic Park film is a combination of a baby elephant's squeal, an alligator's gurgling, and a tiger's snarl? I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty rad. Now let's go through this process step by step. And here's an animated storm scene. We're going to come up with a sound effect to play over this scene to bring more life to it. Now let's first assume that it's a bright and sunny day outside, so no possibility of capturing rain sounds. And according to the weather forecast, there won't be for the foreseeable future. Let's further assume that we're working on a very tight budget and don't have any fancy recording equipment and no money to buy props or other things to make sounds with. This is an excellent situation to be in, as it will push and improve your creative muscles, so let's get started. First, let's look at the scene and see what specific sounds we can identify. Since the focus of the action is mainly on the storm in the window, let's narrow it down to just storm sounds, like rainfall, rain hitting the window and the windowsill, wind blowing, and of course, thunder. Our first task is to go out and capture sounds that resemble these sources as close as we can. Now to do this, I'll use a free recording app on my phone and anything I can find around the forge here. It's important to record a handful of samples for each sound. That way, when you go to edit, you have some options to choose from. Alright, now that we have some sounds to work with, let's head over to our DAW to start mixing them together. It's important to note that you won't be able to save your Soundation project with imported sounds if you're using a free account. So if you're gonna start this project, make sure you're committed until you're finished, or you could lose all your work. First off, let's load each of our sounds onto a separate track. Now, something I like to do here is color code different groups of sounds. I'll keep the wind sounds yellow, make all my rainwater sounds blue, and the thunder sounds I'll make red. This helps me stay organized as I work, and it makes it easier to identify specific sounds. Now let's set up an appropriate clip length for the scene we're working with. So it doesn't sound too repetitive, let's make the clip last 2 of the scene loops, or about 14 seconds or 8 bars. Next, we want to go through each one individually and trim the clip to the best samples. What you're looking for here is the ones with the least amount of ambient noises or background noise, ones that have a decent cushion of space before the start and after the end of the sound, and frankly, just ones that sound the best or closest to what you're trying to represent. Now let's start working on these individual sounds. You can solo a track by clicking on the little S button in the track header. This way we can add effects to a single sound and hear it alone without the other sounds. Now let's start with the wind sound. The clip right now is not long enough to cover the 8 bars, but that's an easy fix. Since I want wind blowing the whole time, let's simply loop the clip until it reaches 8 bars. Now here's another subtle little trick. The trained ear might be able to tell that this is a looped track, especially since the loops are so short. So let's take the middle loop and reverse it. That way the track as a whole sounds like it's constantly changing. There, that's better. Now keep in mind that that little trick won't work for every sound. This particular wind track just happens to sound pretty similar whether you play it backwards or forwards. Now let's look at the vending machine sound, which is supposed to be thunder. Presently, you can hear a lot of background wind noise and also a lot of the sharp metallic impact of my fist striking the side of the vending machine. And what I really want from this sound, or what's most important, is that low rumble. That's the part that sounds most like thunder. So let's add an effect to this track called equalizer. The equalizer has 3 knobs, low, mid, and high. Now, these are referring to the frequencies represented in the sound. To cut out the background noise, I'm going to turn down the high and the mid knobs completely. Now I'll slowly turn up the low and maybe the mid until I get a sound that is close to a thunder boom. Just a little bit of mid will provide that impact of the boom in the beginning. Then increasing the low will keep that nice rolling thunder sound until the end. But be careful not to increase the low too much though, or it will sound like it's underwater and may cause some distortion. Now we'll go through the rest of our tracks with this same approach, affecting each one individually until we have a chorus of great storm sounds. Experiment with different effects to see what produces the best sound. And once we've done that, let's start mixing all the tracks together. Since the viewpoint from the scene is inside, I'm going to turn the volume down on the wind and outside rain sounds. I'll keep the rain against the glass sounds a little bit higher, and the thunder I'll keep fairly loud because it's loud no matter where you are. Also, to account for playback on two speakers, right and left, I'll pan my outside rain tracks accordingly. I'll make one play primarily in the left speaker and the other primarily in the right. Now, making adjustments to volume, pan, and clip placement will bring you to 8 bars of a sweet summer storm. And there we have it, the basics of sound design. I hope you enjoy this process as much as I do as you go out and build some sound effects on your own. I really can't wait to see what you come up with. Thanks for stopping by, and as always, see you next time in the Forge.